All right, thanks so much for your time, everybody. My name is Joe Mast. I'm a security engineer for CrowdStrike, and the title of this presentation is, as you've probably already read, is Bootsquad, Stomping Out Your Cyber Squatters. Today I'm just going to talk about some methods for domain possession which exist out there to help trademark holders. Let's go on to the next slide there, please. Thank you so much. We'll have an agenda today. We'll cover some specific terms, some definitions related to the UDRP process. We'll talk about, we'll do an overview of what UDRP is. We're going to dive into some protection mechanisms that you as a cyber squatter or a trademark holder can enable to protect yourself and those domains which you possess. We'll also talk about the DNS abuse policy and the URS. So we'll skip on into the definitions now. Thank you so much. I'm certain everybody's probably heard of all of these, but we're going to walk through them for anybody who's unfamiliar. At the top here, we have ICANN. That's the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. This is a nonprofit organization, and they sort of coordinate the usage of DNS. Next, we have service providers. These are third parties who handle the UDRP complaints which are submitted. They are all accredited by ICANN. There is 6 of them currently, and they're spread around the globe. Being one of those service providers, WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, they are the largest service provider. They have many precedents and cases under their belt, so they've kind of gone through the rigmarole of settling all the crazy complaints that have come in under UDRP, and they are the largest service provider. Today, you'll also hear about complainants and respondents. A complainant is a trademark holder. They're an entity, an individual, an organization, somebody that holds a mark and then starts the complaint against a respondent. In this case, a respondent is somebody like a cyber squatter. They don't have to be one, but for our use case today, they're going to be one. They're the entity or individual in this case who is squatting on the domain and the complaint is filed against. And then we also have cyber squatters. Those are the individual, who's out there registering those domains. They're putting traffic to those domains that are identical or confusingly similar to those trademarks which are registered to the complainant. And we can move forward there. And then just some definitions for you real quick. You might hear these 3 different terms. The top level domain, this is the highest level of domain in the hierarchical system of domains. It's going to be on the right side of the dot. For example, .com, .org, .net. You also have CCTLDs and GTLDs. CCTLDs are for country codes. It's a 2-letter country code, and it's specifically associated with a particular country. And then things like GTLDs, they're generic, and they are domains that are top-level domains for specific purposes. I'm certain everybody's seen like a .com, a .biz, or if you work in security, you've seen the .zip. That's been pretty fun recently. So they all have specific purposes, and they're out there for you to register. And we can move forward. So we're going to start with what is UDRP. I'm certain if you're out there managing a company, with like a large set of trademarks, you've probably heard of this policy at least once. It's a policy created by ICANN. It's the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy. It was created in December 1999 by ICANN. It was an alternative to reduce the overhead caused by litigation around trademark owners wanting to obtain domains which were registered, under false pretenses. So it's pretty speedy. It's going to usually take around 2 months time frame, and we'll dive into some of the specifics there. And then the outcome of this is that your domain can only be canceled or transferred. There is no other outcomes. So again, it's meant to be a fast bypass for long-term costly litigation related directly to domain disputes. It's pretty darn quick and being around 2 months, and you can get this domain canceled or transferred. A fun fact here is the first case settled under this is for the WWF, the World Wrestling Foundation, and it was in December 1st, 1999. It was the first case settled under UDRP. We can move forward. And again, that case was also settled by WIPO, so they not only have all the precedents, they also settled the first one. So again, UDRP is a complaint structure. There's three portions of the complaint structure which need to evaluate to true for you to win your complaint with the service provider and the registrar. One is that the domain is identical or confusingly similar. Sorry to bring up my notes here real quick. My apologies. So whichever domain is registered by the cyber squatter, it should be identical or confusingly similar to the existing trademark on hand. This is evaluated by a panelist, so a human will evaluate that. And it should be something that you, the complainant, has rights to. As well, you will need to prove that the respondent has no rights or legitimate interest. So the second part which needs to evaluate to true is, one, you should provide evidence that you have rights to this. And two, you should also provide a case that makes that the respondent has no legitimate interests or rights. And you should provide evidence to this. And then part three, the domain name has been registered in bad faith. And that's where what we're going to talk about today is, from the research I've conducted, it seems that bad faith could be spoofed and then used to potentially win large trademark holders domains that they wish to own. So we'll move forward and kind of dissect each part of this complaint structure a little bit more in depth, but that's at the high level of the three portions which need to evaluate the true for you to obtain your domain via UDRP. All right, so how long does this take? I know as soon as you probably find a lookalike domain out there that's phishing on behalf of your organization, how quickly can you get this done under UDRP? At a minimum, it's probably going to take around 2 months. You could shorten this process in the event if the respondent does not respond to your claims. You can cut out that response process, but we'll talk through each specific portion of the process here real quickly. It's broken into about 7 different sub-processes, starting off with the filing. This filing is the filing of the case under UDRP. As an example, there's no deadline. So there's no like statute of limitations here. An example here is Toyota recently filed a case that was on a domain which was registered almost 18 years prior. This is just a typograph, based domain. Basically, it was Toyota with an extra T. It took them 18 years to file this UDRP case, but they were successful in obtaining the domain once they could prove all three were true, which we discussed earlier. There's a verification stage, which happens next. Your service provider will make sure that the domain is locked and that the privacy information is removed, not for everyone to view, but for the case, the respondent and the complainant, so that you can potentially make amendments if the privacy information the HUIS information was not provided correctly. I know we've probably all seen this from time to time, where HUIS information is either spoofed, incorrect, or just not provided at all. So that's what this verification stage is for. The domain is locked, so it can't be transferred, and the true, whatever HUIS information, the full set of it will be provided here. We'll move on to step 3 after those 2 days. There's a compliance check. There's a word count. Basically, the service provider will need to validate that the explanation meets the required word count, which I think is 5,000. As well, it will need to, the service provider will validate that the complaint meets all of the filing items, basically that all the boxes are checked, everything is complete in the compliance section. So they're going to go through, evaluate your complaint, make sure it's valid. If it is, it'll move into commencement. This commencement portion is where it's going to take around 20 days, can take less, but basically they're going to take your complaint and file it with the register wherever that domain is located. They're going to send it out, and they're going to require a response from the registrant or the respondent within 20 days. In most cases, respondents do not respond, so you can shorten this time frame, but there is time in there for them to review what has been sent to them, especially if you have a high dollar domain or something that's very close to your brand. They will occasionally respond. So they have 20 days in there to provide a response, and then this goes back to an arbitration or a panel, which comes with a decision stage. So your service provider will assign, basically for the basic fee, they will assign you one panelist, and this is a human who's going to review the complaint itself and the response, and they're going to say, Oh, okay, this is confusingly similar. They're going to evaluate the two domains depending on what is submitted. They're also going to evaluate if all three conditions we spoke about earlier are true, and they're also going to see if there was a response submitted. If there's no response submitted, the decision will already automatically go through with the transfer stage in favor of the complainant, and that will take 10 days once that decision is provided from the panelist. So if the panelist says, we should transfer this or we should cancel this based off of what was requested in the complaint, 10 days after that panelist decides that, they have 10 days to actually enable that functionality and push the domain whichever direction was requested per the complaint. And then as a note, an interesting item, within the decision portion, normally with your basic UDRP complaint, you'll get one panelist who will review your decision. In the event this is something that's very important to you, you can have your evidence reviewed by 3 panelists, which may have a better, more favorable decision based off of potentially complicated evidence which could be submitted. So that's always an option to you. That adds a small fee, but you are capable of requesting a larger panel size during that stage. Also, the respondent can request a larger panel in the event they feel that more evidence needs to be evaluated. All right, and we can move forward there. Thanks so much. On the right, you'll find kind of like a high-level flowchart of how this process functions. But basically, it's just broken down that that complaint comes in, it's validated to ensure that it's not BS, and that the complainant has gone through and submitted all of the required functionalities. The response is filed, or in most cases, it is not filed. Again, those registrants, they sometimes do not respond, sometimes being almost 90% of the time. So it's favorable for you to do this UDRP process in the event that you want to get one of those domains back. A panel is approved and appointed, so they'll be assigned to your case. They'll review the evidence or evidence that is not submitted by the respondent, and then they'll give you that decision. And then there's 10 days for that to come back into your portfolio or be canceled. Again, each stage has a variable time frame. Extensions are available. Some use cases where extensions are available is if you're submitting claims with multiple domains. There's been UDRP complaints with 500 plus domains, so you could imagine evaluating the evidence in those cases would take months. But again, most of them are very swift. It's denoted in the language under UDRP. The only actions which you can get out of this process, again, are transfers or cancellation. And at all times, it is always possible to settle. WIPO actually provides special protections here. I haven't looked into other service providers, but in the event you'd like to save money, if a respondent would like to settle, WIPO, as long as the panel has not been appointed, will allow you to settle for a reduced fee. And we'll talk about some of the costs here coming up. We can move on to the next one. Thank you so much. So if you've ever gone about the process of purchasing domains on the open market, something that's very desirable or has your corporate trademark or brand in it, may be very expensive. So the costs of UDRP, while they are expensive, I don't think they are insane compared to the prices of some domains, especially, I don't know if you've been paying attention to things like the .ai domains. They're tens of thousands of dollars. So what the UDRP fees start as, there's 2 main fees. There's a filing fee and then a legal fee. We'll talk about filing fees first. These are service provider specific. Today I'm going to talk about WIPO, and I'll give you an approximation on the fee there. WIPO as a service provider charges around $1,500 US for managing a single UDRP case. As an interesting note, the fees have not changed since they were originally introduced in 1999, and you can choose one of the other 6 service providers, but there's not really much variance. The policy is subject to all of them, and they only vary about 20% total in costs. So if it were me, I would pick the WIPO service provider, as they have the most precedence under belt and they understand what they're doing in this case, where some other service providers, they only have less than 20 cases solved so far. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. It's just if I wanted to validate, where I was pushing my complaint, I'd push it towards the service provider WIPO. As well, places where you can have expanded fees is multi-domains. With WIPO specifically, when your complaint expands past 5 domains, you'll have an exponential fee increase. As well, we talked about earlier, if you'd like to have your case and evidence evaluated by a panel in the decision portion, larger than 1 person, this panel costs extra money. The complainant or the respondent can produce a requirement that this is enabled. So, think about that as an expected legal fee. If the respondent comes back, you may have to pay for a 3-person panel. It's only about a $500 increase, but it's something that you might have to, account for. And then we have legal fees. So this is a formal complaint. You want it to be done correctly. I'd suggest that you work with an attorney for this or your counsel. Most of the fees that are associated with legal fees are going to be flat fees. As there's no monetary gain or monetary response in UDRP filings, you don't get any money back, you just get the domain. So again, from what I have seen, most lawyers charge flat fees for the legal fee to file this complaint for you. So realistically, it's about $1,500. If you'd like to have a 3-party panel, that can add an extra $500. If you want to do multi-domain, you're going to pay based on the amount of domains over 5. And then there's going to be some legal fees to file that, which are going to be a flat fee in most cases. And your attorney will discuss that with you. And we can move forward. All right, so to break down what really is the 3 tests or the 3 elements which need to evaluate to be true as part of the UDRP process, we're evaluating the first control here. We're going to break it into 2 subsections and we'll work through it. One is the domain must be identically or confusingly similar to your mark. In the bottom right, you'll see one of those find the differences. Basically, it's any of those items where something is confusingly similar. You can have variations, spelling errors, abbreviations, substrings, modifications, homoglyphs, even using some of the TLDs like sucks and other TLDs out there related to that would evaluate with a mark in it. Those are all considered to be confusingly similar to the mark itself. In the middle of the slide, you'll notice though that WIPO overview does not consider the TLD exception and does not consider the TLD except in special cases. So for example, if your trademark evaluated, if your trademark and the TLD read together to be the full trademark, in most cases, they would not consider that to be valid under UDRP, except for in cases where it's potentially derogatory, like if you use the TLD sucks or other words that are out there as TLDs. So you should not try to consider submitting UDRP complaints utilizing the TLD itself. We can go ahead and move forward. Part 2 of number 1, we're going to talk about trademark requirements. You yourself need to have rights to this complaint, rights to this mark in order to make this complaint. So you can't make this on behalf of somebody else's mark unless you're, a law firm or legally representing that mark holder. You need to have rights to the mark of the service, as well as dictated by some UDRP cases in the past. All marks internationally are accepted. So if the complainant is in China and the registrant is in the US, it's all valid. The only thing which is not valid is that there is state level trademarks in the United States. Sorry, I'll pull up the actual wording for you. Because state regulations are issued with no examination, a state registration does not give rise to the same presumptions of validity and ownership as does a federal registration. Basically, we're saying here that All marks, WIPO has evaluated as part of the WIPO overview that all trademark rights are valid except for US state marks because they do not examine if duplicated marks exist in other states. So they'll only respect US federal registrations. Common law trademark is also accepted, but it must be heavily defended. You'll have to provide extreme defense in your complaint, highlighting how you are locally known as that trademark. It is not recommended that you use that, especially if, unless it's like a sort of last defense there. But it is possible to defend a UDRP complaint with proper evidence and common law trademark. So if you have both of those two functions, you've evaluated the first test is true, you own the mark, and it is confusingly similar. We'll move on into some examples of what these confusingly similar items look like. I'm sure everybody's probably dealt with this. In the upper left-hand corner, we have a whole bunch of different types of techniques for creating lookalike domains, which are all valid and could be submitted as UDRP complaints. I'm sure you've seen and dealt with these in your daily life. As well, we also have some examples of URL hijacking with spelling mistakes or substitutions. These are all also valid in the event that they would meet all three conditions as presented here. Again, being confusingly similar, you have the mark, you own that mark, and we'll work through the other two conditions. But these are just some examples. Homoglyphs are also valid here. We can move on forward. Part 2, you need to demonstrate that you have rights or legitimate interest, and you also need to prove that the registrant, or the respondent, my apologies, does not have any rights. So success here requires demonstrating, you need to prove how you own this. So you should provide potentially your US trademark numbers or wherever you are located. As well, you should describe how the respondent does not have any valid justification to this mark, the branding, or whatever is being used in the domain. Evidence will be collected as part of your complaint and submitted. So you should be able to work with your legal team or whoever is holding your trademarks and submit all of that information as part of your original complaint. You need to make this part as strong as possible because you, one, want to defend yourself, and two, prove that the respondent does not have any rights to stand on. And finally, with this part, burden of proof can be shifted. If you prove that you have rights to this and you can't prove that they don't have rights to this, as part of part 2, they can be requested to, they being the respondent, can be requested to provide how they have proof of demonstration or rights to this. So in the event that you are unable to collect further evidence, it can also fall back onto the registrant here to provide, you've registered this. The other party who says they own it owns this domain from the information provided. How do you own it? So just think about that. If you're a squatter, you may want to potentially document why you have purchased this lookalike domain and keep that in your portfolio. We can move forward onto part 3. And what everybody's probably interested in is the use of bad faith. And this is where a lot of UDRP claims really get the heat or the backing. There's 2 types of bad faith. There's registration of bad faith, and then there's usage of bad faith. The 4 types of the highlighted methods are listed below, but basically, if that domain is registered for the purpose of resale, maybe you monitor or you're an administrator for a corporation. These cyber squatters may reach out and request a sale of a domain for a large swath of money, much more than what it originally cost to purchase from the registry. That's an example of bad faith there as well. Based off of the privacy information, an example of bad faith might be a pattern of conduct. If you're a serial cyber squatter and you use the same information over and over again, under UDRP, arbitration panels have found that people performing this with a pattern of conduct is considered a bad faith mechanism. If you're out there disrupting a competitor, and what under UDRP is considered a competitor is any person who is opposition of another. So if you're out there and you're just trying to purposefully disrupt your competitor or anybody who would have that similar looking or confusing looking domain, you can fall under bad faith. And then the last one is confusion. I'm sure that's been dealt with a lot in the cases of phishing. Lookalike domains are powerful weapons for attackers to launch their phishing domains and campaigns on, phishing emails, things along those lines. So if it's been used for any of those sort of, if it's been used or could be used in the likelihood of confusion, that can be considered an item under bad faith for establishing bad faith. And again, all three of these conditions we talked about earlier. You have to have the mark. You must be able to demonstrate how you have rights to it, and the other party does not. And then you need to also establish bad faith. These all need to evaluate to true in order for the UDRP complaint to be successful. So that's why it takes so long to go through, and also why you want to have a very strong complaint whenever you make it originally. So I wouldn't rush on your complaint because you need to compile all this evidence in order to be successful. We can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. And then just some interesting considerations here. We talked about domain privacy, but also GDPR exists. I know everybody probably has had to deal with that. But basically, there's now privacy information and redacted information in DNS and in Whois, the database for who is registering these domains. So whenever you're filing your initial complaint, you should take for face value what is inside of the Whois information. Whatever name is displayed there, the contact information, your complaint should be filed with that information. As part of the verification process, you will be provided the full Whois information, of which then you should make an amendment with your legal team to actually update the claim against the full swath of information. And then also, I'm stating here that amendments may bring strength to your complaint. Sometimes whenever the Whois information is fully revealed, you can identify from that information submitted that it is a serial cyber squatter. This can bring a lot of strength to your case because, again, that is a method under bad faith, which you might not have noticed before, but you could also amend your case to, one, bring that serial cyber squatter to light, and two, highlight that their behavior as a method of bad faith. Some examples I've seen here is a couple important cases were recently defended where domains were falsely registered in former President Barack Obama's name. And there's just a lot of interesting precedents from WIFO around filing these cases with privacy and enabled. So very interesting portion of this. We'll move forward. Thank you so much. One thing that I had identified is that the bad faith section of the UDPR is something that you could potentially create yourself if you were a malicious trademark owner and you really wanted to get something back. Evidence submitted within UDRP complaints is human reviewed, and it doesn't appear from what I have researched to be technically validated or dug into extremely deep. Another thing I have noticed evaluating a large portion of squatters' security controls is that they lack the security mechanisms that you would want to have on your domains, potentially to protect them. What am I saying about this is that I've seen a lot of squatting domains that lack SPF records, that are potentially in domain registrar accounts which do not have multi-factor authentication. And I've also seen squatters which use automated tools to purchase domains and then they point them to incorrect name servers. What does this lead to? This leads to, one, the ability for you, a trademark holder, to spoof emails that are related to squatter resale emails, trademark abuse emails, and spam emails. Basically, you could make your own bad faith in the event you didn't have that. And it could be evaluated that, it could help your case. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying that it's something that appears that you could generate the bad faith and then have a very successful case based off of a squatter purchasing a domain and then, insecurely not securing it correctly. As well, I've seen compromised domain accounts at registrars. where the squatter will hoard that domain, sit on it, and it will get taken over when there's like a large dump of account credentials, and then it'll be used for something malicious. Meanwhile, the squatter didn't actually mean to do that. And then we also see that with the incorrect name servers, sometimes squatters will go ahead and they'll automatically point websites to name servers which are not hosting that website, in which another squatter will move in and start using that. So the last two are kind of cases where a squatter purchased the domain, but they've lost control of it. This also opens it up for you to identify if these things are going on and sort of make your own bad faith. Again, squatters will sometimes forget their SPF records, and you can potentially send, threatening emails like, "Hey, let's sell this domain for $80,000 or some high arbitrary amount." You could use trademark marks, images, logos, and emails related to the lookalike domain, or you could start sending spam with phishing links, which are all covered under bad faith by an unprotected domain, similar to your trademark. We can move forward. And then just some examples of spoofs. They're pretty common ones. So in the upper left-hand corner, we actually have an item, an email, which is from a domain that's not related to LinkedIn, but it's just being sent from, I think it's coeng.com. And that's actually an excellent domain, which is good for domain abuse procedure, not for UDRP, but just an example I wanted to show. And then another one is paypal.com there, you see, with the one added into it. This is an excellent domain for being obtained under UDRP. PayPal doesn't own that, I bet you they do now. We can move forward, so I just wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like. Another consideration in item I had seen is very spoofed who is information. I gave an example earlier where former President Barack Obama's information was used to register domains. This can be negative for you if you're a registrant in a case and you actually want to hold that domain. But another interesting part here is using a respondent's or a complainant's true who is information to register a domain. What I'm saying is in the case I'm citing is Barclays Bank versus Barclays Bank. A similar lookalike domain was registered with identical who is information. This sets off some alarms where you're asking yourself, do we have a tech debt issue where somebody in Barclays was registering this domain and just didn't know how to and went and did it themselves? Is this an attacker that wants to hide inside of my who is information and they're using the identical information and trying to own this for as long as possible, potentially use it for a phishing campaign? So one thing to look out for and monitor is who is information that's identical to your own. And this is where I would state that control of having a true portfolio of your domains and monitoring those is very important. Also, if you operate any sort of security reputation tools, there's a couple out there that can kind of give you a grade for all of your domains or your portfolios or your external presence. Utilizing identical who is information may have this show on your security reputation tool. So in the event an attacker registers a domain similar to yours and utilizes identical who is information, it may temporarily lower your score, especially if they do this in mass. Just something to look out for and to think about as well. It might throw you in a loop for, did my team register this and not tell me about it? Or is this a malicious attacker? So just who is information is always interesting to look at, especially in the case the real Barclays Bank won their domain back from Barclays Bank. We can move forward. Here I'm just giving you some Markholder protections. You're an existing trademark holder and you want to secure your domains as best as possible. What can you do to ensure that that's easy to do? This is just a small checklist. It's not a total list, but you could run through utilizing a credible domain registrar. And what do I mean by credible? You should review their information security policies and their how much risk they're taking on and how they secure themselves. before you go ahead and work with them. As well, you should utilize and enable domain locking and non-push-based multi-factor authentication for your registrar. I'd request that you enable SPF records to either deny mail from domains you don't send mail on, or specifically point out where mail should come from so that spoofing bad faith is not possible. You should make your registrar aware of your trademarks. By working with your registrar and sort of importing your trademarks, you can have them help you purchase new GTLDs when they come out. For example, when .zip dropped, you could have those in your portfolio ahead of time and beat the squatters out there. It sort of makes your life easier if you work with your registrar. Also, I would recommend utilizing a domain monitoring registration tool. This tool will just monitor the list from all the registrars, and it will update you to any sort of squatter activity related to your marks or abbreviations of your marks. You can do a lot of things with these sort of tools to help reduce how effective squatters can be, as well as malicious squatters. And then I would also recommend that you should build in socialize a policy for managing your portfolio. People at your organization are going to want to purchase domains potentially related to, if you're growing, they're going to want to purchase these domains. So you should have a process and procedure out there for managing your portfolio, knowing what's inside of it, and being able to expand it when it's required. It shouldn't be some sort of like hidden process. It should be well socialized. And again, those domain monitoring tools are excellent for not only monitoring new registrations. If there's something that you can't obtain through UDRP, domain abuse, or the URS, they can also monitor those domains in the event that they are dropped or locked or transferred. So it's just a really nice visibility item, and it helps reduce overhead of having to, manually watch those sort of domain registrations. We can move forward. If you are a squatter and you're watching this talk and you want to better protect yourself, I would say that you should also utilize a domain locking and multi-factor authentication that is not push-based. I state this just because I've seen squatter accounts taken over and used maliciously by other third parties. I would also submit correct WHOIS information, as that's just an easy in for bad faith evidence. And I would also utilize privacy services in conjunction to that WHOIS information, just protect your identity. Under the WIPO overview, it would be important to document a business case of why you need this lookalike domain, and explain or have on deck evidence as to this domain's purpose. If you really want to keep it in its portfolio and potentially sell it at a later date, or have it be purchased by the trademark holder, you're going to want to back it up as to why you need this. And the best way I've seen to do that is through having credible business evidence as to why you need this domain. It doesn't have to be real, it just has to be a plan at a minimum. I would also enable SPF records for your domain in DNS so that you can protect against malicious mail and document where mail should come from. That way, in the event any sort of spam mail or spoof mail is tried to be sent on that domain, you can protect against that. And then also, I would avoid registrant information where precedents can be identified. And what I mean by this is that if you are a serial squatter, you should not use your information again. You should potentially break out chunks of domains that you're squatting on and use unique information for each one so that they cannot establish, they being the complainant, a precedent based off of your actions in domain registrations and squatting. So maybe like a new identity for each time you do this, or chunk it by organization or area. There's also some other protections we'll talk about, like the domain abuse in the next slide. In the event the UDRP is not successful for you, or you're not able to demonstrate all three of the characters that were highlighted earlier, you can't evaluate all three to true. there is the DNS abuse framework. This is adopted by 48 registrars and registries currently. It was developed in October 2019 by the .org Foundation. And it covers these 5 top areas here: malware, botnets, phishing, farming, and spam. And basically the last action that this abuse framework takes is killing that DNS registry, or that domain registry. So it works through the chart at the bottom there. As part of this abuse framework, if any of these conditions are met, you should reach out to the site operator, the registrant, the hosting provider, and work your way from left to right on that list. In the event that these conditions are met, you can get the registry to pull the domain itself. But it's just, it would take a long period of time. Statistics are published, and I can give you some information on this, but I would definitely suggest utilizing UDRP or URS first. But again, if the domain is hosting malware, hosting botnets, phishing is utilized for opioid farming or spam, then this is a good process for you to potentially investigate and maybe even get the site or other services taken down. And then the last thing to consider is URS, and that's on the next slide. Thanks so much. So URS is also offered by ICANN. This is Uniform Rapid Suspension. This is very fast, usually less than a month. But remember, this shouldn't be used by large trademark holders who'd like to add the domains to their portfolio. This is very limited in scope, but it is very fast. So this only allows suspensions of domains. So this is going to push out, you're going to need to place a back order with your registrar for the domain in the future. This requires a very high burden of proof. The complaint can only be 500 words. So you must be able to demonstrate similar things as to UDRP, but in a very short complaint. The fees are very reduced as compared to the $1,500 fee. This is only $300, depending on the registrar or the service provider you work with. And this is fast. Decisions need to come back in 3 days. Again, it's usually under a month from start to finish, but this can only be used for suspensions. You'll still need to handle on your own how to obtain that domain after it is suspended, placing that status. Because of this, it's not recommended that you use this method, but it is out there for you to use in the event that you either have, a reduced legal budget, or you need something taken care of right now, and you can handle the rest on the back end with your registrar or a third party. But just wanted to make sure that everyone knew about URS. And then we'll just conclude. UDRP is just a potent resource. If you're a trademark holder, you have the tripart framework here, and there's certain stages within the process that could be spoofed. So I wanted to just bring that to everyone's attention. I think it's very powerful, but also the fact that it's human evaluated leads to its potential abuse. As well, we have UDRP. As well as UDRP, we have anti-abuse and the URS policies, which can also help you prevent cyber squatters. If there's any questions, that's going to wrap it up. But basically, I just wanted to let you know, as a trademark holder, you have some excellent mechanisms for obtaining those domains without having to go to court. They vary in speed, time, and cost.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Joe, for an excellent presentation.